If you want to protect your Social Security check from a serious future cut, you need to pay attention to this right now, because this is not some rumor floating around online, and it is not political gossip. According to the Social Security Trustees Summary, the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund is projected to be able to pay full scheduled benefits only until 2033. And after that, continuing income would cover about 79% of scheduled benefits. That means a painful reduction if Congress does nothing. And that is exactly why this new bill matters so much. I want to walk you through what it is, what it tries to do, what it could mean for retirees, survivors, and disabled workers, and why so many people keep waiting until the last minute to care about Social Security when this issue has been sitting in front of Congress for years. Source. The bill we are talking about is H.R. 9519 in the 119th Congress, introduced by Representative John Larson on June 29, 2026. Its short title is the Social Security 2100 Act, and its official purpose is to protect our Social Security system and improve benefits for current and future generations. Right now, it has been introduced and referred to committee, which means it is not law, no checks change tomorrow, and nobody should act like this has already passed. But it also means the window is open again, and every time one of these bills lands in Congress, people either pay attention for 5 minutes and move on, or they finally decide that maybe the most important retirement program in the country deserves more than a shrug. Source. And here is the bigger picture that too many people ignore. Social Security does not suddenly become gone when people hear words like depletion or insolvency. What the trustees are saying is that the reserves get exhausted and the system would then rely on incoming revenue, which is why benefits would still be paid, but at a reduced level if Congress never steps in. The combined OASD trust funds are projected to pay full scheduled benefits until 2035, and after that, about 83% would be payable from continuing income. So this is not a collapse in the sense that checks vanish overnight, but it is absolutely a cut. And for millions of older Americans, even a cut of that size is devastating because their budgets are already tight, their rent is higher, their groceries cost more, their insurance keeps rising, and there is no magic room left to absorb another hit. Source. What makes this conversation so frustrating is that none of this came out of nowhere. Lawmakers and policy experts have known for decades that the financing problem was approaching. People have argued about whether the answer should be more revenue, lower benefits, a later retirement age, some combination of those, or a broader redesign. But while the arguments kept going, real life kept moving. More baby boomers retired, prices kept climbing, agency staffing strains got worse, and families that depend on 1 or 2 monthly checks kept hoping someone in Washington would treat this like an emergency before it became one. That is why a bill like this grabs attention. It is not because it solves every problem forever without trade-offs, but because at least it is a real attempt to say, here is a framework, here is who pays more, here is who gets help, and here is what we are willing to defend. Supporters of this bill like it because it tries to do 2 things at the same time: strengthen financing and improve benefits. On the financing side, earlier versions associated with Larson have centered on applying Social Security payroll taxes to earnings above $400,000. That is one of the most politically charged parts of the whole debate, because the central argument is simple. Most working people pay Social Security tax on every paycheck up to the taxable wage cap, while extremely high earners stop paying above that cap. So the bill tries to reach more of that upper-end income. Policy groups that have analyzed earlier versions of Social Security 2100 noted that taxing earnings above $400,000 would bring in more revenue and push the trust fund depletion date further out, though they also noted that some versions did not fully solve the entire long-term shortfall by themselves. Source. Now let's talk about why that matters to ordinary viewers. Because most people listening to a video like this are not making $400,000 a year, and they are certainly not structuring income in a way that shields them from payroll taxes. What they care about is this: will my monthly benefit be there? Will it keep up with the real cost of aging? And will my spouse or survivor get crushed financially if something happens to me? That is where the emotional power of this issue comes from. People are not talking about abstract budget tables. They are talking about medicine, utilities, food, car payments, property taxes, rent, and whether they can help a grandchild or keep a roof over their head. That is why even a modest benefit improvement feels huge when your margin is already thin. One of the reasons Social Security reform gets so much attention is because the current system already leaves many people feeling like they are surviving, not retiring. Even when annual cost of living adjustments arrive, a lot of seniors feel like those increases disappear almost instantly into higher premiums, higher prescription costs, and everyday inflation. So when a bill promises stronger benefits, better minimum protections, or a formula that better reflects the real cost pressures older Americans face, people listen. They should listen. Because if Congress only talks about solvency without talking about adequacy, then the conversation becomes, how do we preserve a system that still leaves too many people behind? A real reform debate has to address both. Another reason this bill resonates is because Social Security is not just a retirement check. It is a survivor system, a disability system, and a family protection system. When people think about it only as what I get at 62, 67, or 70, they miss how many households depend on it after a death, after a disabling illness, or after a career that simply did not produce enough savings to withstand a crisis. That is why any proposal that touches survivor benefits, minimum benefits, or disability rules gets so much attention. For many families, the question is not whether a proposal sounds fair in theory. The question is whether it keeps a widow from losing too much income, whether it helps a low-wage worker avoid poverty, and whether it keeps a disabled beneficiary from falling off a financial cliff. There is also a second battle happening at the same time, and that is the battle over administration. Larson's Social Security page argues that the agency has been under strain, that staffing levels and service have become major issues, and that protecting field offices, phone access, and customer service is part of protecting benefits themselves. That matters because a benefit you cannot access, a correction you cannot get processed, or an overpayment problem you cannot resolve can feel just as destructive as a legislative cut. People do not experience Social Security only through policy papers. They experience it when they try to call, when they try to file, when they wait for an appointment, and when they need someone to fix a problem before the next bill is due. Source. And this is where the frustration turns back toward the public, because people love to say Congress never does anything, but then too many voters tune out until there is a crisis. They do not ask their House member where they stand. They do not ask their senators what their actual plan is. They hear slogans about protecting seniors, but never press for specifics. Do you support expanding revenue? Do you support lifting the cap? Do you support stronger minimum benefits? Do you support protecting survivors? Do you support full funding for the agency that actually delivers these checks? If the answer is always vague, then the outcome will stay vague too, right up until the deadline gets close enough to scare everyone. And let's be honest, Social Security reform is politically dangerous because every serious solution creates a fight. If you raise more revenue, somebody says it is a tax increase. If you cut future benefits, somebody says you are balancing the budget on retirees. If you raise the retirement age, somebody points out that not everyone can work longer, especially people in physical jobs. If you try a mix, then both sides attack you. That is why so many lawmakers love commissions, talking points, and delay. Delay is the most popular policy in Washington because it postpones accountability. But delay is also how you end up backed into a corner where the choices become harsher, faster, and more painful. That is why bills like this matter even before they pass. They force the conversation into the open. They force members of Congress to take a position. They create a record. They reveal who is willing to put a proposal on paper and who is content to criticize from the sidelines. H.R. 9519 is now on the table. It can move, stall, get revised, get attacked, get ignored, or become the basis for a larger negotiation. But at least it exists as something concrete. At least people can read the title, track the committees, and ask their elected officials a direct question instead of letting them hide behind generic promises about saving Social Security someday. Source. So what should viewers take away from this today? First, this is not law yet, so nobody should spread panic that benefits are changing overnight because of this bill. Second, the underlying financing problem is real, and official trustees' reporting makes that clear. Third, this legislation is one of the clearest signs that the debate is active again. And if the public wants a solution that protects checks rather than simply trimming them later, pressure has to happen before the deadline gets closer, not after. And finally, if a politician says they want to protect Social Security, ask them exactly how. Not in a slogan, not in a clip, not in a campaign ad. Ask them which bill, which revenue, which benefit formula, which timeline, and which side of the trade-off they are willing to defend. Because here is the truth. Social Security is still one of the most important promises the federal government makes to working Americans. It is not charity. It is not a side program. It is the foundation of retirement security for millions of people. And when Congress waits too long, the people who suffer are the ones who can least afford the uncertainty. So yes, this is a must-see moment. Watch the bill. Watch the committees. Watch what your representatives say. And most of all, do not wait until the headlines turn from important to too late, because by then the choices get smaller, the panic gets louder, and the people paying the price will be the same families who depended on that monthly check all along.